Good afternoon and welcome to India Narrative interview series. I'm delighted today to be joined by Mr. Narendra Taneja. Mr. Taneja is a leading energy expert in the country, and naturally, he's also a top expert when it comes to understanding the global geopolitical and geo-economic situation. Welcome, Mr. Taneja, to India Narrative, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'll begin, Mr. Taneja, about the cabinet reshuffle which has taken place, and what specifically do you think are the signals that is giving in terms of Indian economy and in terms of energy?
Well, if you look at the construct of the new Council of Ministers and the talent and the expertise and kind of freshness that the Prime Minister has brought into the Council of Ministers, I think is very fascinating. And if I may just focus, let's say, on the energy sector, at the time when we import, 86% of our total requirement of oil, 54% our total requirement of natural gas, and we are also importing a bit of coal, we import a bit of uranium, and we also import 90% of the equipment that we use for producing solar power in this country. So at that time, Prime Minister bringing in Mr. Puri, veteran diplomat, former India's ambassador to the United Nations, former ambassador, and so to bringing him in the cockpit of India's petroleum and natural gas sector, I think is very, very significant. This is a time when we need to build fresh bridges with organizations such as OPEC, such as International Energy Forum and International Energy Agency, and at the same time with other big oil and gas and energy consumers, such as China and Japan and Korea, Indonesia, and of course, other smaller countries, but nevertheless very significant. So to bringing in a veteran diplomat with his vast experience, both at the UN and outside the UN, I think there is a message in it, and clearly shows that he wants the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, in particular, to be preparing for the coming months and coming years when challenges in terms of sourcing oil and gas, challenges in terms of oil and gas diplomacy, energy diplomacy in general, and India's relationship with major oil producers such as Iran and Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and the United States also, and of course Brazil and several others, is going to play a very, very important role. So I think this has been done very consciously, very thoughtfully. It sends basically a message to the international community, energy community. Look, India is now looking at it and looking at building deeper and deepened bridges with all these countries, and at the same time to oil and gas and energy circles community at home, that it's an international business. The government recognizes it, acknowledges it, and government is now fully prepared.
One element which will come in strongly, of course, Mr. Taneja, is geopolitics, which is rapidly changing around us, especially in the post-COVID era. And we can see that specifically now coming into the situation in Afghanistan, let's say. Highly turbulent. We don't know Taliban is going to win this battle, this war, you may say, or not. But it's a highly fluid situation in a region or in a country which is both resource-rich on its own, but is also a connector with the oil and gas producers in Central Asia. So how do you think we in India should be prepared for this turbulence which is coming first in Afghanistan, then I'll take you to other theaters?
Well, you see, Mr. Puri is actually moving in to the cockpit of Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministry at very, very challenging times, extremely difficult times, because we have invested heavily in terms of aid, in terms of goodwill, in terms of relationships in Afghanistan. When you look at the map, Afghanistan is is like located at a kind of junction. It's a junction that connects South Asia in one direction, Central Asia on the other, and West Asia, in the west. So a very, very important country. And we therefore we have invested heavily. And by and large, the people of Afghanistan have tremendous goodwill, for India and Indians and Indian investors. But at the same time, with the US pulling out, with the NATO pulling out, and with kind of, chances that, or predictions that Talibans, we don't know good Talibans and bad Talibans, but Talibans will move into Kabul, and many people believe that probably they'll take over the full control of Afghanistan anytime soon. We still don't know. I mean, it's going to be a mix of good and bad Taliban, or it's going to be only good or only bad. Probably it's going to be mixed, but even within mix, probably the battle will continue, and then eventually, you see, whosoever is more powerful will be controlling. But that said, our problem, our challenges don't end here. We have invested heavily in terms of our relations with countries in Central Asia. We have been exploring the possibility of building energy bridges between India and Central Asia. With Turkmenistan, we have even signed a deal, and we are part of the, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, or what is known as TAPI gas pipeline. We have invested money in that. We have invested resources, goodwill, and at the same time, we continue to hope that we will be building further energy expressways between India and Central Asia, and which means that you need Afghanistan for all that. But the new regime in Afghanistan, we still don't know how it's going to look like. We don't know what's going to be the shape of it, what's going to be the mind of it. But it looks like that it's going to be very, very challenging. And TAPI as a project is probably going to face more challenges than ever before. But it's still, as I said, we don't know. But that seems to be the kind of there seems to be a growing consensus. It's going to be very, very challenging. But when Afghanistan, for instance, if Afghanistan goes for a toss, that means that Middle East, starting from Iran and going beyond Saudi Arabia right up to Libya and Algeria and even beyond it, is going to be a huge challenge for us. So if the change of regime in Afghanistan or change of power in Afghanistan is going to actually change the entire energy landscape in Central Asia, vis-a-vis China, Central Asia vis-a-vis Middle East, Afghanistan versus Middle East, and also India versus Middle East and beyond. So I think basically when you look at the chessboard, where India has been a significant player, thanks to its the kind of goodwill and investments in Afghanistan, and that's now it looks like is going to change drastically, which means that our place and position, and power in the chessboard probably is going to be challenged. And countries like Pakistan and China are not going to make it easy for us. They're just going to make it more difficult. And China, as we all know, has been against TAPI from the very beginning. And Pakistan, we don't know whether Pakistan is enthusiastically interested or they're just interested because there is a pressure on Pakistani government for certain foreign government, and also from public opinion within the country. So I think we are. I wouldn't say we are back to square one, but certainly the chessboard in terms of its construct is going to go through a massive realignments and changes, and rules may also change, and which means that more and more challenges for us in coming months and years.
Iran becomes a very important country for two reasons. One is, of course, that it is energy rich itself, which is huge. And secondly, it's a transit route, which is linking Chabahar port, let's say, if you look at that as one of the starting points. And then it goes northwards towards Afghanistan, but then it also links up further from Herat, if you see that part of Afghanistan, then moving westward into Uzbekistan. And should we therefore start looking at plan B, that if we are to tap Central Asian gas, then instead of TAPI, which involves Pakistan, which is a vector we don't know its predictability, it should be more towards the direction of Iran from Central Asia. And that should be a way forward. Second thing is, when it comes to the Central Asian countries like that, such as Uzbekistan. Now, Uzbekistan has been fighting terrorism for a long time and would not want the Taliban to come full sway, let's say towards Mazar-e-Sharif and northwards into the Central Asia heartland. So probably we'll have allies if you look at the fine print to stop, at least carve out corridors to where which are insulated from Taliban. Given the fluidity of the situation in Afghanistan, we need probably realign ourselves more with Iran and with the Central Asian countries and probably Russia, because all three have one common factor. None of them want a dominant Afghanistan, which is dominated by the Taliban.
We have to, natural gas, of course, our dependence on natural gas is only going to grow. Is right now we are importing 54% total requirement and is going to grow because as we move more and more in the direction of using natural gas for power production, for domestic use, and for industrial use, and so on. So sourcing is going to be a huge challenge. And Iran at the same time, India has expressed its willingness to deepen ties with Iran, and our foreign minister was there just yesterday, as you know, and so we really want to engage with Iran using energy as a kind of the mainstay, as a backbone of our relationship. But I must share with you at the same time that our experience of the last 3-4 years has not been very, very encouraging. For instance, a gas field, Farzad B, which ONGC of India discovered, they've refused to share that with us. And in fact, the negotiation is still going on, but it seems that they are not very keen to give it to us. And at the same time, in Chabahar also, I mean, they've not been as enthusiastic as, for instance, India. Our ministers have been there several times to Chabahar also. Mr. Gadkari had been there 3 times or 2 times. And with changing situation in Afghanistan, we don't know how they're going to respond. So at the same time, I think it will depend a lot on how Iran responds to India's initiatives and goodwill, and at the same time, how international community in general and the United States in particular, deals with Iran, because our interests are aligned with several other countries, Western countries, NATO members, and the United States and other members of Indo-Pacific and Quad. And we have to see Iran with that context. But at the same time, India follows very independent Iran policy and is very keen to engage. But Iran needs to respond also and make it a little bit easy for India. A close ally and friend of Iran. They promised to invest something like $428 billion in Iran. I don't think they're going to invest that kind of money ever, but at least that's what they talk about. And there seems to be a kind of, lot of bonhomie between Iran and China these days. I don't know whether it has something to do with Afghanistan too, which I suspect it does. And so the overall result is that, unless and until things change a little bit more, like it's good news that Iran wants to now have good relations with Saudi Arabia, or the United Arab Emirates and Iran are talking now more. And there are kind of, countries, Russia, like, is brokering peace between Iran and a few other countries in the region. So, but we need to see all this in the context of China, number one. And number two is Russia. Is Russia kind of following a very strong independent policy in Afghanistan and Middle East? Or is it part aligned with China, or is it nothing to do with China? We need to basically understand and decode all that. But that said, all the same time, the technology is changing the picture. The world, the Biden administration is pushing for renewable energy. And in India also, the general mood now is that, we invest more in generating electricity and using electricity as a kind of the main source of energy in the country for vehicles, for factories, for etc. So India is also working on that picture. And the United States, Western Europe, and some other countries, Japan, they're promising to collaborate with India. So which means that India, at the same, while we deal with all those challenges, India has slowly started building an alternative so that we can have kind of energy independence over the next 25, 30 years, based mainly on electricity, electric mobility, and electric vehicles, and so on and so forth. It's not easy, easier said than done. But at least the baby steps have been taken. And we have seen some private sector companies announcing big, ambitious plans to invest in renewable energy and electric mobility and electric vehicles and so on and so forth. So I think we are working on both sides. because an energy independence needs to be our agenda. But at the same time, there are some very interesting developments like Saudi Aramco keen to invest in India. Abu Dhabi very keen to invest in India, and they also know at the same time India is emerging as the biggest consumer and customer of oil and gas in time to come, and that's why they want to build this interdependence with India. So I think the overall picture is a little bit complex, and India needs to navigate a little bit more smartly.
Should we be moving a little away from Iran and Central Asia and going closer towards the Gulf countries as a reliable source of energy as well as investments? Again, that does not mean we leave Iran, but in the process of recalibration, do we need to focus more strongly on the Gulf countries rather than Iran and Central Asia, given the current situation?
We should not be looking Central Asia only in terms of energy. Oh, Central Asia is a very important region. The US may be losing its appetite a bit when it comes to Central Asia, but for India, together with its friends, including Russia, I think continue to play a very important role. And Central Asian energy sources are important for us in Turkmenistan, in the Caspian, and in Kazakhstan, of course. And I think there would be challenges, and there would be challenges. Some of these challenges actually sponsored by China, but then it's politics. We need to kind of fight these battles and try to win them. So I think we must continue to build energy bridges, not necessarily only for energy, but in order to have them to deepen our ties with Central Asian countries. We have enjoyed good ties with Central Asian countries for centuries, and if not millenniums. So I think it's important we maintain that. Challenges like in Afghanistan, transit, etc., would always be there. But who knows? They change tomorrow. Who knows that Taliban, they realize that, look, I mean, now that they've achieved their objective, they need to build bridges with India. Otherwise, they would be completely in the pocket of only one country, Pakistan. For next 30 years, we will need more gas. Consumption of gas, demand for natural gas is going to go through the roof in this country as are we trying to take pipe natural gas for cooking to practically every household across the country. We have very ambitious agenda in that direction. And Iran has the largest reserves of gas in the world. Some geologists say more than actually even Russia. So which means that we've got a country next door, which is the largest reserves of natural gas that we need for next 30, 35 years. And there may be challenges. Iran is a difficult customer for everybody, not only for India. So we know that, knowing the nature of the country, knowing their civilization, there is a bit of cultural arrogance. Some of their people, they still live in the past. When Cyrus the Great was ruling, and all that. But that's why we should learn to deal with it. And but I personally feel no, we should not be withdrawing from Iran. We should continue to talk, and we should try to get Iran also to invest in India, and we should ask Iran to allow us to invest in upstream, in oil and natural gas, also in midstream pipelines, and even downstream, like in petrochemical plants and all that. We should be investing, and we should be building, because Iran is a very important country, very smart people, and there are a lot of similarities between us and Iran, and they will be playing in time to come very, very important role, even bigger role in Central Asia and in Middle East, and they can be our partner in terms of building or deepening our ties, which is with Central Asia. We can go to Central Asia via Iran, so and together with Iran, in fact. So we should be doing that. Our relationship with Saudi Arabia has gone through big changes. We are much more closer than ever before in the history. The same goes for the United Arab Emirates. We are very, very close to them. We are working in different sectors, including energy, but there are many others, including making sure that the future of Middle East and Gulf in particular is safe. And so I think there's a lot going on. But our relationship with the Gulf countries should be independent of our relationship with Iran. That we have close to 9 million Indians living there, who send roughly 65 billion roughly dollars every year in remittances, and we have got some very enterprising Indians settled there, and they play a very important role. And for many people, Dubai is almost like their second home for those who even live in Delhi and Bombay. I think, which gives us tremendous kind of advantage in terms of dealing with these countries. So we need to take it to a new era, a new this thing where China talks more than China does. So and at the same time, China, to my sense, is they don't understand Islam as well as we do, and they don't understand religion as well as we do. And we have these 9 million people also. We have open relationship with Saudi Arabia. We have open relationship with all other GCC countries. So I think we need to we should not worry too much about China. We should be building this, and at the same time, many countries in Africa today, and it's Middle East and all that, they are getting a little bit wary of China in the sense that they don't want to put all eggs in one basket. So it works for us. But the most important thing for us is to make sure that we build good bridges in the energy sector. And other thing is that we expand our economy and focus more on infrastructure, modernizing our economy, and that we single-mindedly focus on building India into an kind of economic superpower.
One is Africa. How is that coming into our energy security equation? As you are well aware that we invested heavily in Mozambique. The ONGC Videsh has done it. Even the other oil majors have done so, with Total and probably independently as well. But that area, Mozambique, has been hit very badly by terror strikes. And that is likely to be the challenge, which will probably come into when we move into the geographies like Africa and the rise of terrorism, which comes into that. So, in the long term, how do you view Africa as a provider of energy security to India?
Africa, is a very important continent, not only for India, for the whole world. I mean, I have often said that, this century, people keep saying that this is Asian century. And I always argue this is not Asian century, this is African century. Because by 2050, India, China, all these countries will peak, and they will need Africa as a market in order to sustain their growth, sustain prosperity.
And food, probably. It's also a future food basket of the world.
Absolutely, and raw material and food, and even manpower. So very, very important continent for us. So we should be, according to me, we should be looking at Africa with three different angles. Number one, our direct relationship with Africa. There is a history for it, but mainly with South African countries and East African countries, and also some of the North European countries, which are Arab. And at the same time, we should be looking at Africa when it comes to Arab part of Africa, and also the region in western part of Africa via the Middle East, which means that we go there together with our friends and partners in the Middle East. So we make it a kind of tripartite expedition when it comes to Africa. And at the same time, we should be building our bridges with Africa in terms of energy security together with European Union and other Western countries, because many of them, they know they were masters there, they colonized, they know Africa well, they have good relations with some of these countries. So, and the tripartite with Europeans also would be a very good idea. So basically, having a three-pronged approach. But my sense at the same time is that in Africa, we should be investing more in oil and gas, that we have already done. But at the same time, solar power, with the International Solar Alliance being headquartered in Gurgaon and playing a very important role. So this is a very, very important platform now with us, which is headed by an Indian and which was set up with an Indian-French initiative. And Africa, in most African countries, solar radiation quality is very good. And they also know that their future lies actually in solar power. And so we should try to become a leader, a global leader in solar power, and help African countries in terms of technology, in terms of training, expertise, setting up solar power plants, and building these kind of joint ventures, together with Europeans, together with Arab countries, together with other Japan and Korea. And I think there's a lot that we can do. So when we talk of energy security, it should be oil and gas, and equally important, solar. So, and we have already started, we have taken some good steps. Many of the countries in Africa have now become members of International Solar Alliance. But I think we need to be a little bit more aggressive and need to invest more in terms of capital and technology. So there's sky is the limit And as I said, that we must focus on Africa, because Africa is, we will realize soon in 10 years that without Africa, we'll not be able to get the kind of economic growth that we're looking for in the country.
It's very clear that the rise of China and the Belt and the Road means that China is expanding globally. And given our history with China, including the recent clashes in Ladakh, in the Galwan Valley, uh, I think there is a problem in the India China relationship, which is going to not disappear soon, probably strategic and probably long term. In that context, uh, do you think we now need to move closer to alternate supply chains, let's say? You mentioned in your introductory remarks. Should we be moving more towards a Quad, not just from a security angle, but also from an economic angle, from a health angle, from developing vaccines, for example, and most importantly, building new supply chains, which are an alternative to this over reliance on China, to be truly independent, which we wish to be. And related to that is the Africa comments which you made. You see, there's an asymmetry in terms of economic power. We are in between India and China. We are about 3 trillion. They are about 15, 16 trillion dollars economy. So their asymmetry needs to be bridged. So do you think when we come to Africa as well, that the Quad element comes in? That is investments coming in, that India and Japan, for example, club together to make investments in solar and other areas. We probably will have to move collectively with these four countries and others in ASEAN probably uh, to make our next moves, which are in a way competitive, which will not give China a cakewalk over geographies which are resource rich, which are the future, which you mentioned. So probably we need to move a little more as an alternative planning in terms of a plan B with these countries, and to take our story forward, the India story forward, the rise of India as more collectively rather than individually facing up to China.
I think, my sense is that when it comes to China, for that matter, any other country in international relations, we should not be sentimental about these things. So our approach towards China should be very unsentimental. They have a very strong, economic base now. They can afford a big defense budget. As rule, is an authoritarian regime. They're very ambitious. The last 4 or 5 years, the rise of new China is very clear that the new China is not going to be a benign power. And so, which means that, they want China to be a kind of a superpower first in the Asian region, Indo-Pacific, and then eventually the whole world. So they have that ambition, which I find very old-fashioned, because the world of 2021 is very, very different. And I don't think that in time to come, any one country would be in a position to become that superpower or super China. I think they probably are living a bit in the past, and eventually they will have to pay the price for it, because they're not being realistic. But that said, at the same time, the fact is that China has grown big. And my sense is that, their ambition or their plan that first they want to make sure that it's a unipolar Asia, that's not going to happen. It won't be acceptable to India, to Japan, to Indonesia, to ASEAN, even to little Singapore, and of course to Iran and Russia and other players as well. So I think we should not be going only by rhetoric. We should be looking at China carefully, China's history, China's ambition, and their own challenges. China is still a developing country. There are lots of problems, in terms of ordinary people there. Ordinary people life is still not like a developed country. It's more like any other developing country. So we need to understand the internal dynamics, economic dynamics, and social dynamics, and the challenge that they face, within. And at the same time, we know that they're very ambitious. They can do what they did, for instance, up in the Himalayas soon with us. We should be prepared for that, with conventional, machinery, and at the same time with diplomacy. But my sense is that Indo-Pacific, we should be strengthening our ties with the Indo-Pacific countries, with the Quad countries. But at the same time, we must stay engaged with China, with Russia, and we should not perceive them as enemy, and we should not let them perceive us as enemy. We are all doing all this, deepening our ties with the Pacific, with Quad, in our national interest.
Yeah.
Because once they lowered their rhetoric, and once we know that, look, we can trust them, then we can. But we should stay in the international, like in BRICS and international banks that we, in Development Bank and Shanghai Cooperation. And if tomorrow we should also try to build a new organization of all the big oil importing countries, and where China can play an important role. So we should continue to do that. So as I said, let's not be sentimental about this.
How do you do that in a manner which is advantageous to India? I mean, it's basically you're negotiating strategy and the economics which goes behind it, which probably should be factors while you engage with all, including Russians and including the Indo-Pacific countries, if I understood you correctly.
Well, first of all, I don't think that the Quad is a new NATO. China says that. Quad at
Absolutely.
this stage, we need to lead. We need to be one of the top leaders of the world. We should not be following anybody. We are too big, too important, and too large an economy. Trust me. Don't go by the GDP of number of 3 trillion. We are actually 8 trillion on PPP basis. And the world needs us for their own growth, for their own prosperity. And if in areas where China cooperates together with them, where they don't, we cooperate with other countries, and we cooperate with America wherever we can. One superpower unit, that's gone. It's history. It's a multipolar world where we are on the high table, and we are basically playing a bigger role, and we are waiting for to see more traction. And traction will happen once we are clear about what we want. And we got to convey this message to China. We are not we can be partners, but on equal terms. Today, there is no international organization, formal organization for cooperation in the energy sector. None. International Energy Agency is an organization of OECD countries, not of India and China, not of developing countries. Why can't India and China join hands and lead and make sure the headquarters of that new international organization is in this part of the world, or its headquarters shared between Mumbai and Shanghai? Just to give you an example, we can do that, and we are doing it. There will be opposition, there will be challenges, and all that, especially from countries like China. But so be it. We can deal with it. Now, that is what is needed. So wherever necessary, we cooperate. Let's not forget one thing. If we say that China is our enemy, or X countries are enemy, then we will not be able to leverage that. If we say that, look, we also have good relations with China, then you can leverage that when you're dealing with Indo-Pacific or Quad and other countries. But so it's important we are not part of any big bloc alone. But these blocs are, again, not against any country. So we are too big for that. So I think my sense is that, wherever we need to work together, we work together. And wherever, for instance, we need to fight together, we fight together. And wherever we need to tell China, look, what you're doing in South China, vis-a-vis Vietnam, or up in the Ladakh, it's not acceptable. Their mindset is still in the 16th and 18th century. We have seen more of that the last 4 or 5 years. China's changed. China is actually on bad gear the last 4 or 5 years. So I think when they realize it's fine. But to me, it looks like that it's not going to be that easy. But we need to invest more in our own vision, and we need to invest more in being a global leader, on our own strength and on our own principles.
There was a formulation which came up that India has acquired strategic autonomy. We had moved away from the template of NAM and non-aligned to a doctrine of strategic autonomy, where we are a power which has emerged of its own and which will engage with all countries, because, as you said, that now we are going to be one of the leaders of the world. You think we got to while this debate on Quad and other goes back, we need to go back to that fundamentals, that we will exercise strategic autonomy, and as leaders we will engage with all wherever it is necessary to promote our core interests.
Long term. And long term, we should be working actually only on that strategy. But along the way, there are going to be challenges. There are going to be
Yes.
challenges, for instance, challenges from China today. It can be some other country in the Indian Ocean tomorrow, or it can be something else. So we need to basically work out response, depending on the situation of the day. So right
Sorry
now,
to
the
interrupt
new
you. That would mean tactical adjustments depending on the situation
absolutely,
that arise.
absolutely. So tactical adjustment, tactical response along the way. But as I said, China will try its level best to make sure that India is not able to realize its full potential, because China looks upon Asia, the entire Asia, subservient to it. That's their ambition. But it's now upon us to make sure that we don't let that happen, and not against China. We are all to protect our own interests together with like-minded countries. And let's not forget one thing: the tremendous strength that we have, democracy. Democracies of Asia, democracies of the world. We need to work together eventually, and democracies are going to win. I mean, short term, authoritarian regimes can make some good progress. They can also be fine, but those are their internal issues. We are not here to preach democracy, but it helps when you are able to build bridges with democracies like Japan, like Australia, like South Korea or Indonesia, and others. I think it helps. But as I said, the most important thing is that we focus on our internal things, strengthen it. My worry is only one, that we should be actually at 9 to 10% growth trajectory.
Yep.
When we are less than that, it worries me. And if we are like less than 9%, it worries me about. So we need 9% GDP growth for next 20 years, which means in 20 years, we will be about 18 to $20 trillion economy that will allow us to sustain a defense budget of $750 billion, if not more. And that will give us the kind of muscle that we need, not to go against any country, but to protect our national interest.
Which opposes the nationalization of our crown jewels in the public sector, like ONGC and others. Would you like to elaborate on that point?
The energy sector is crucial for us, especially oil and gas, for next 20 years. The next 20 years, we should have dependence on, import is rising by day, practically. Now, in such a situation, it's important that in a warlike situation, and that can happen, we don't live in a very ideal world. And so we have domestic sources of oil available, sufficient enough for our three arms of the Indian Navy, Indian Air Force, and Indian Army, and for the railways, for coastal shipping, and for all the critical areas. So I think, which means that we should be producing at least 35% of total requirement of oil domestically.
Yeah.
And that has to be part of the strategic vision for energy security. And therefore, what is important is that companies such as ONGC, which is an upstream company, that must remain with the government, and the government must make sure that ONGC has a mandate and is producing sufficient amount of oil, which is sufficient in case of emergency for our armed forces and for our domestic, critical areas needs. And therefore, and we should not think only in terms of losses and all that. These are organizations which are like companies as important as, for instance, our, armed forces and others. So therefore, companies such as Indian Oil, which takes care of the distribution, ONGC, which produces oil and gas, that these companies remain with the government. And if at any stage they're found to be not competent enough or efficient enough, then you invest and make sure they're efficient. It does really, you need only 2 months to make sure that they are, back on the track, and for instance, they've lost the direction. The privatization is not some antibiotic or rambam that, it will solve all the problems. So we should not be even forget about doing anything of that. We should not, this idea should not be even allowed to be on the table. And that's what I wrote, that, don't privatize. You don't privatize, companies like ONGC. We are not the United States. We are not a developed country. We are still in an emerging country. Our geopolitical location is different. Our challenges are different. We have got China on one side, Pakistan on the other, and this vast Indian Ocean on the other. All kind of submarines are going around there, not necessarily all from friendly countries. And therefore, we need to think in terms of what is good for us. What the US is doing, best of luck to them. What China is doing, best of luck to them. What Europeans do, best of luck to them. But as far as India is concerned, we need oil and gas companies which produce oil, which are controlled by the government. Distribution company, at least one major company controlled by the government. We need that for another 25 years, part of the energy security period.
Brilliant. Mr. Taneja, as always, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you very much. Thank you.